Hello, and welcome to the Lore of Braunhaven. So, as I promised, this episode we're going to be talking about holidays. We went over the calendar uh, last episode with the days of the week and the months. And so today we're going to be getting into holidays. And since it is that season, we're going to start, rather than starting at the beginning of the calendar, we're going to start in month number 10, Octus. And the holiday is Veil's Eve. And so you see here that I have a map of the cosmology um, that is sketched out. And keep in mind, this is a fairly rough map, but Veil's Eve is one of the more important holidays. And it should also be noted that part of the Braunhaven campaign setting is that um, if you if you have access to it, one of the rules that we use in my campaigns, and it is becoming more and more hard codified into the Braunhaven campaign setting the further I get into it. But there is a product by Appendix and Entertainment called Oktoberfest, and excellent book. I highly recommend going to Drive Through RPG and picking up Oktoberfest. It has, I think I got it on Drive Through. I believe so. Um, the that book includes a lot of stuff. It has, you know, witches and witch hunters, classes, race. They've got the pumpkinkin. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But one of the things that is included in there that is important to Braunhaven, other than the witch, of course, is ritual magic. Now, ritual magic is a form of casting magic that can give you a couple of different benefits. So, for instance, you might cast ritual magic to allow you to cast a spell at a higher spell level than you would normally be able to cast. And so you this generally is going to take um, a number of levels, and you gain those levels by either adding in other casters and or doing it during a particularly powerful magical season. And there, the summer solstice, the winter solstice, things of that nature. There are different points on the calendar that are considered to be more powerful than others. And a third way of gaining levels, of course, is to be casting in a place of power. Perhaps, where ley lines meet, or some special location. For instance, like in our world, um, Stonehenge could be an example, or at the Great Pyramids of Giza, or some place that has a particularly powerful significance can add levels. And then in addition to that, you also have to expend a gold piece value in additional components. Now, what these components are is really left up to the referee. And so, having completed all of these and a significantly longer amount of time, let's say that you wanted to cast, let's say that you're a first level caster, but you want to cast Magic Missile as a sixth level caster, which is going to make for a really powerful Magic Missile. You would have to gain, probably for that, you would have to gain +5 levels. And then in addition to that, there would be a gold piece exchange, and I believe it's number of turns plus level. So this ritual would have to go on for like 6 turns, so an hour. And when it is complete, that spell would then be memorized. You would have memorized one 6th level magic missile, and once you decide to burn that and cast it, it's gone. And in order to do that again, you would have to do that ritual all over again. That is one form of doing ritual casting. Another form, of course, is they can have completely different effects. A good example of ritual casting that is actually in the original rules, or at least hinted at in the original rules, is, for instance, Bless. Bless can be used as a ritual that you can use to consecrate ground or to create a holy symbol or something along those lines. So make a sacrificial dagger, something like that. So that can all go into that can all be tied in with ritual casting, and Oktoberfest has full rules for that. And so I use that. That is a part of Braunhaven campaign setting, is ritual casting. And Veil's Eve is an example of a moment in time that happens every year. That is a calendar day of power. And so, to explain what Veil's Eve is, so the very basic interpretation of Veil's Eve is that it marks the end of the month of Octus, and people of the Braunhaven region of the Glossian Empire believe that on Veil's Eve, the barrier, the veil becomes very close to the prime plane, and the veil is what separates the prime plane, for example, from the shadow realm. It also separates the prime plane from the Fey realm. But you'll notice, and that this was done intentionally, that these aren't perfect circles, and so it should be noted that all of these rotate. They orbit, and so, like, for instance, at times you've got this demiplane, for example, over here, that it orbits around the shadow realm. At times it will pass through the celestial palace, or and the hells as well. So I mean, things can kind of go pear-shaped for the people living in these demiplanes. And the same can happen over here, where in the Fame realm it'll touch the plane of air and the prime plane, etc. So what is to be noted is that everything that essentially touches the veil cross bleeds over into the prime plane. And the transitive property, of course, is, with the exception of demiplanes, because they're generally walled off, other planes like the plane of air, water, and earth and fire, earth kind of overlaps everything permanently. But, you know, if any of these planes touches the veil, it crosses over into the prime plane. And so, with this orbit, you're going to have, and because the planes are not perfectly circular, you will have times where it will be thinner between the prime plane and some of these other planes. And Veil's Eve is an example of where the veil is thinner between the prime plane and the shadow realm. And so it is believed that it is during this period, the end of the month of Octus, that is at its thinnest, and denizens from the shadow realm can cross over into the prime plane. Now, it is also true that denizens of the prime plane can cross over into the shadow realm and possibly come back, but you only have, I mean, that thin window is very limited time period. And I'm not talking about 24 hours. You're talking about maybe 12, because it's at its thinnest at like midnight. And so, not even 12. I mean, 8 hours where it's thinnest. Now, that's not to say that's not possible to cross over at other times. It's just that that's your easiest point of slipping in and out without having to pick the lock, as it were. So most of the people, I mean, this is the way of life. This is just how things are. And of course, the druids and naturally the witches take this rather seriously. This period of time, but I guess everybody else, stuff happens. And so they take that day and they have holidays, or have a holiday, And it is exactly what you would expect. It is our uh, Halloween, real life Halloween type um, celebrations. Kids dress up in costumes. Well, the adults sometimes dress up, but the kids dress up in costumes. They rampage around the towns, having There's parties, or the adults have parties and balls. They hand out trinkets and sweets, usually in the form of baked sweets or candies that are that are made, and occasionally the adults will give the children a Drachpence, which is the Glossian Empire's copper piece, and so the kids trample around town. It's not so much a trick or treat. I mean, of course, the kids may play tricks, but kids do that anyways. Um, it's more of just a fall festive uh, time, and so, but the reality is, like I said, that this is a real thing, and so you have these entities that can cross over. I mean, you're talking about uh, well, naturally undead, but really, um, we should talk about the Shadow Realm. So, what actually goes on in the Shadow Realm is is kind of important to this. So the Shadow Realm, this is where you go when you kick it. Your soul or your essence, essentially, your non-physical um, anima crosses the veil and goes to the Shadow Realm. And once there, um, now if you die and you end up in the Shadow Realm, you essentially forget everything about who you are, what you were, what you used to do, what you used to like, hobbies, skills, and are basically a blank slate. I mean, there is, of course, um, some muscle memory. I mean, you're not just wandering around like one of Doctor Venture's clones. You are you're there, but your previous self is forgotten. And if if you cross over and you are not dead, and there are many legends of people having crossed over, trying to um, regain a loved one that passed, or um, bartering some kind of deal, um, things of that nature. The longer that you are in the Shadow Realm, the more that you will start to forget. And it starts with um, very small things. For instance, you might forget the name of your mother. You might forget, uh, you know, a loved one or somebody that you grew up with. Things of that nature. It just stuff that you probably don't think about all the time. And then when it comes to trying to, if somebody asks you about it and you try to recall it, suddenly it's not even that it's forgotten. It's just it never was. And so staying in the Shadow Realm for any length of time can be fairly dangerous. And of course, over too long a period, um, then that you now are essentially stuck there, because not only do you not remember anything about who you were or what you were, um, you because of that you have no real desire to move back over to the prime plane. You might not even remember that the prime plane is a place. So this is your reality now. But essentially, everybody who ends up over here when they're dead, or forgetful, um, they more or less live out a life similar to most people live out on the prime plane. There are farmers, there are fishermen, I mean, probably with a slightly reality, of course, has a slightly darker twist because um, the undead that we see here in the prime plane are natural citizens over in the shadow realm, and so there is quite a bit of a more chaotic bent to the shadow realm, um, chaotic to neutral bent to the shadow realm than there is in the prime plane. But there is still a there is still the order of law in that there are rules. This plane exists for a reason, and there are certain rules that have to go about. Now, everybody who dies ends up over here doing whatever, living whatever life as more or less blank slates. People start families. People, um, it's a fairly depressing existence, but it's kind of a purgatory, limbo kind of situation, and you just go about your day. Now, the ruler of the Shadow Realm, of course, is Octus, who the month of Octus is named after, and he is Lord of the Dead. He's known as the Nightbringer, and he who is in the shadows. And um, he holds court here, and he will hold court, and it is his job to ultimately to deem the actions of um, of the souls that are in his realm. And at some point, those souls, the people that are living here, doing, I was going to say living their lives, living their unlives in the shadow realm, at some point, nobody knows, there's no set amount of time, you will be called to Octus's court where you will be judged and your heart will be weighed. And your heart is weighed against the actions that you performed on the prime plane. Now, there are extraordinary individuals in the shadow realm just as there are in the prime plane, and their actions in the shadow realm can sometimes affect ultimate judgment. There's a possibility that, unbeknownst to the soul living there, because they have no memory, that they have redeemed themselves in some way. So that is a possibility. It is very rare that that's even taken into account. There are far less extraordinary individuals in the Shadow Realm than there are in the Prime Plane. The reality is there's very few extraordinary individuals on the Prime Plane too. It's just you hear about them because they are extraordinary. Once this is weighed, Octus then passes judgment, and then at that point the soul is deemed either, you know, lawful and they lived by their alignment and they are sent to the Celestial Palace, or they are deemed chaotic and they are sent to the Hells. It should be noted that Octus himself is chaotic. He is more on the dark and evil side, but so old school essentials only has a 3 alignment system. There's lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And in a lot of ways, I like that, but it doesn't. It is very narrowing. So he would be that. I don't know. Perhaps he's more of a neutral alignment. He is on the darker side, but that's more because of the job that he has to do. It is a very grim task at hand, and he doesn't necessarily like the idea of having to kick some people. He doesn't like the idea of having to kick them down to hell, to the 9 hells. But in some cases, it's very obvious that that's where they need to go. And then in other cases, he doesn't necessarily like the idea that some people are going to the Celestial Palace. Yeah, they're the weight of their heart versus their actions on the prime plane weighs out, but only just. And do they end up going to the Celestial Palace? So this was often a question. Neutral, if the heart in the if the heart weighs as much or is even as the actions on the prime plane and you are neutral alignment, more than likely you'll just stay in the shadow realm. Um, I mean, that's just how that works. And that I mean, I guess it's not a terrible life. It's not as good as being moved up to the Celestial Palace. It's not as terrible as being moved down to the Nine Hells. And they have their own thing going on up there. And so this inability to or dislike of some people, passing the rules only just and getting kicked up to the passing with a D and getting to the Celestial Palace, or failing with a D and getting sent to the Hells, didn't always sit well with him. And so it's very similar. The similar thing happens in the Fey realm, is that he created these demiplanes, and they are walled off. Everybody who's played Fifth Edition, if you played Curse of Strahd, that's a perfect example of a demiplane. Barovia is a demiplane. These are walled gardens. A lot of cases, they are smaller versions of the shadow plane itself. Um, some worse than others. So, but for the most part, they appear a lot like things do in the prime plane, except it might rain more, it might snow more. It might be, instead of high noon sunlight, it only ever gets to a twilight kind of situation. So these demiplanes, he will take some of these people and just say, okay, here's a demiplane, and there can be an infinite number of demiplanes. I know that it only shows 3 on the map. Those are just examples of how that plays out. There can be an infinite number of demiplanes, and these demiplanes, once you're in, they are locked off, and that's it. There's some kind of special, spectacular situation has to come about in order for you to get back out of a demiplane. And so that is his answer in a lot of cases, where he says, yeah, you pass the rules to go to one place or the other, but I don't feel good about that, because it's a very narrow margin, and so instead I'm going to lock you away into this demiplane. And a lot of times he makes the excuse that I'll put you in here until I can figure out what else to do with you, or until somebody from the upper or lower planes decides that they're going to say, hey, whatever happened to such and such, which has almost never happened. And it's kind of like, when your mom tells you to clean your room and instead you just stuff everything into your bed. I'll just stick it under here until I can find a place for it. And, then it's lost and forgotten. And so that's what happens to a lot of these souls, is they just get trapped away. But Octus is depicted as a pale-skinned and very frail man, middle-aged, not old. He wears a black hooded robe, and he has long white hair. And he is known for walking with a staff that is capped with a circular pendant that is set in the center with a red ruby. And a black crow constantly follows him around or sits on his shoulder. And he is actually in love with the goddess Aepus. Aepus. What does Aepus do? Aepus is the daughter of the rains. And so she herself, she's also known as the Gray Lady. She herself is a melancholy kind of woman. She brings the dark gray storm clouds that causes rain. She's known to be always dressed in a gray dress, and her hair is actually made up of gray storm clouds that trail off behind her. And so this is not necessarily his queen. She's not queen of the Shadow Realm. They are lovers. And she can often be found at his side. Their relationship is rather toxic. Not necessarily terribly abusive, but they're both just depressing people. And so she's forever depressed, and Octus is always dark and brooding, and they will have arguments, and that is, what the source of thunder and lightning and rainstorms are across the Shadow Realm and the Prime Plane, and these are fairly frequent. And a lot of times these storms will split the veil, even in springtime. And they'll split the veil and spill over into the Prime Plane, causing these crashing thunderstorms. And so, like I said, Veil's Eve is the point where the Prime Plane wobbles through the veil and is very close to the Shadow Realm, basically just touching, so it's easy to cross over. Um, Octus tries to prevent denizens of the Shadow Realm from crossing over into the Prime Plane, but a lot of times this will happen accidentally. And so, um, this is a lot of times when you see a ghost. A lot of times with ghosts, they will be enacting the same thing over and over and over again. And this is because they they may not have much of the memory of who they were or what they were doing, or rather who they were or are, but they have enough memory left over that they were doing things in the Shadow Realm. They were living a life in a form of life in the Shadow Realm, and a lot of times when they cross back over to the Prime Plane, there's just enough muscle memory or essence left that they will just forever repeat whatever it is that they were doing before they died on the Prime Plane. And so this a lot of times when you see these, like for instance, you go to the ruins of Castle Braun, there is the rumor of the White Lady that is seen. She has long, dark, flowing hair, wearing a all white dress, and she will be seen walking always the same route throughout the castle grounds, going up the stairs, looking over her shoulder at whoever is seeing her, opening the door and shutting the door. When you go up into that door and open it, there's nobody inside. There hasn't been anybody inside in hundreds of years. So, and this will happen over and over and over and over again. And so these spirits that live in the Shadow Realm can accidentally cross over. Other times, there are, of course, um, far more chaotic spirits that will cross over on purpose. In a lot of cases, this is true of vampires. Powerful vampires that have set up some kind of kingdom in the Shadow Realm will, because it is completely unsatisfying for them in the Shadow Realm, they will wait until that perfect moment and make plans to cross over into the Prime Plane. And usually this will happen on Veil's Eve. Now, now, like I said, it is harder to cross from the Shadow Realm over into the Prime Plane than it is from the Prime Plane to cross over into the Shadow Realm. I mean, there are multiple ways that you can get over from the Prime Plane, death being one of them. In the Shadow Realm, Veil's Eve is probably one of the only times that it is possible, unless you are called from the Prime Plane, usually by a high power or powerful magic user, or something of that nature, or a ritual. But it's easier to get over there from the Prime Plane. So next week, or rather next episode, we will be talking about the next big holiday. Where are my holidays? My holidays. So the next big holiday will be in the month of Navius. We'll be talking about the Feast of Saint Gloucest, and it is here in the United States. We have Thanksgiving. It's kind of like Thanksgiving, except it has really nothing to do with finding a new country or anything like that. It is It is just the feast of the saint known as Saint Gloucester. So until next time, thank you for watching, and you have a good day.